All right, welcome to presentation of audio evidence in civil trials with AI-assisted software tools, featuring SpectraLayers 10 and Mathematica 14. I'm Andrew Waters. I'm a lawyer in California, and I connected with Robin Lobel, the creator of SpectraLayers, who is here today. And we came up with this workshop where we're going to go over two modules with you. First module is going to be a technical overview of SpectraLayers, the program, with all the components that you see on the screen. Mr. Lobel will be giving that module for about an hour. And then I have the second module, which is practical application of this tool in Mathematica 14 in civil trials. So I'll turn it over to Robin here, and we'll go from there.
Hi. First, I apologize because I haven't slept much for the past 3 days. And Europeans in the room, I think you know what I mean. So if I fall asleep during my own demo, please wake me up. Or like the laptop yesterday when it shut down, plug me in and I will be back and running. So SpectraLayers 15 years ago, I was a movie student, and I was shooting some movies in the streets of Paris. And Paris is a pretty noisy city, and I couldn't find a solution which allowed me to get rid of the noise to the level that I wanted. So already back then, there was solution like RX, but it didn't give me the kind of surgical, non-destructive control over the spectrogram that I was looking for. So for 2 years, I came up with an idea and started working on it for 2 years. And then as I was, my bank account was close to zero. My wife thought that maybe I should release something now. And especially she was not sure if I was bullshitting with this great idea. So I eventually finished a beta and got the news in a website called Engadget. And from that point, the story pretty much brought itself. I got a distribution agreement with Sony Software back then. They were in Madison, Wisconsin. And after a couple of years, the Sony Japan decided to sell Sony Software to a German company called Magix. After a couple of years, for different reasons, I decided to part way and ask Steinberg if they were interested in becoming my distributor. Steinberg is mostly known for their software Cubase, the VST plugins technology, and the AES Silo technology. So they became my distributor for the past 5 or 6 years now. And yeah, that's basically the story. All right, but what's SpectraLayers? SpectraLayers, I used to describe it often as a Photoshop for sound, or since you guys are mostly used to RX, I could call it RX plus Photoshop plus some other stuff. And so let's have a look at the UI. So the first version of SpectraLayers were really centered about a set of tools that gives you control over the spectrogram and the concept of layers, which allows you to extract sounds from the spectrogram and put them into different layers. And over time, it got some processing modules like the noiser, the clicker, etc. And for the past couple of years, with the rise of AI, or deep learning, more and more AI modules made it into SpectraLayers, in particular with the last two versions, version 10 and version 11, which was just released a couple of weeks ago, which is quite convenient. Those two versions there was a lot of effort to provide the latest state-of-the-art AI in different categories regarding audio processing and unmixing. And that's what I'm gonna give you a short overview of today. So, But before, let's have a look at the interface first. So when I open an audio file, what I see first is a spectrogram. I won't do you the offense of explaining what a spectrogram is, but on the left side you have a set of tools. If you're familiar with Photoshop or have already seen Photoshop, this is quite similar with some selection tools here, editing tools and navigation tools. Each tools have their settings appearing at the top, which allows you to customize each of the tools. And on the right side of the screen, you have a set of different panels with different functionalities. And one of those panels is the panels who control the different layers. And so that's a core component of spectral layers, obviously. So before going to the processing part of SpectraLayers, I'd like to show you some analysis capacities of SpectraLayers. And I was inspired by the talks that we had the past couple of days, and staying true to my principle to never do my homeworks in advance and always at the last minute. I think it paid off today because I was able to integrate some of the things that we saw over the past couple of days. So let's go with the first example. Gunshots. So we had a couple talks yesterday in particular regarding gunshots and synchronizing, finding the onset of the gunshots. And it was mostly based on the waveform. SpectraLayers is rather a spectrogram-centered application. So, and I'm a spectrogram-centered guy as well. So my hobby is the spectrogram rather than the waveform. And during those talks, one thing that was mentioned is that the waveform is usually much more accurate to find the precise timing than a spectrogram. So, and that's true. Usually a spectrogram has to find compromise between time resolution, time precision, and frequency precision. So I look at different algorithms to find a way to improve that. And at some point I found an obscure algorithm on the internet, which was actually pretty clever because it's basically, so you do your spectrogram with FFTs, and then you do a second set of FFTs, which are the time derivatives of the first FFT, and then you do a third FFT, which is the frequency derivative of the first FFT. And this gives you a more precise location of where the points are supposed to be in the spectrogram. So unfortunately, this algorithm as is was pretty slow and it gave some renderings that were pretty chaotic. So I tried to come up with a better solution that looked smooth and that could be running in real time. And so that's what I'm going to show you now. So I set so you can control the FFT size of the spectrogram right here. I set it at the minimum that the software allows in this case. And I slightly increased the resolution. What I call the resolution in that case is actually the windows overlap. So the more overlaps you have, the better you can get, but you're still limited at this point by the time trade-off of the FFT analysis. And so using this algorithm, which was, I think, originally called something like spectral displacement or spectral replacement, I don't remember exactly. But using this refined technique, I can get some additional time precision and frequency precision, but we will see that with another example. Let's merge the two channels. So before the refinements, there is indeed some uncertainty regarding the actual start time of the gunshot. And in that case, the waveform is indeed much more accurate. But if we do this refinement or sharpening, it gives you something that's more in line with what the waveform shows. And one of the reasons I like spectrograms is that you really have a better understanding of what's happening in the sound, and it's not. It's easier to see, especially when you have background noise, reverberations, audio compression. The spectrograms basically always shows you what's inside the sound, while the waveform can be a little confusing sometimes, depending on the recording conditions. So that's a way to increase time precision in terms of analysis. And going back to, again, another example that we've seen yesterday, Cesar kindly sent me some of his playing recordings. So, yeah, that's the one. So I just took a random example. And I'm going to do the same. And it's a great example to see the certainty principle of the spectrogram analysis. Because if I decrease the window size, I get better time resolution, but as you can see, the frequency gets pretty fat, and so I'm losing frequency precision. And if I increase the window resolution, I get better frequency precision, but I lose time resolution. As you can see, it gets blurry horizontally. So we'll try to find some trade-off. This is a reasonable trade-off to me. And then I activate the refinement, and I can see much more clearly how the RPM frequency, I'm not sure that's the fundamental, I think the fundamental is actually a little lower. Let's zoom out. Yeah, it's here. Yeah, it gives me much more precision about the actual frequency that we are looking for. In this edition of SpectraLayers, the resolution is limited to 4 because I have to deal with a lot of different configuration, especially in music and post-production, and this kind of a safeguard to avoid people complaining about the computer being too slow. But I'm working on some specific forensics feature for future versions of SpectraLayers, and this could definitely be increased. Basically, you could get as precise as you want on the frequency resolution if you have a good enough computer. And to finish with this feature, I also gave a try to the ENF. So yesterday I was lucky to have a tour of the NCMF, and Katalin was showing us the live ENF recording, and I find it quite fascinating. And I was wondering how I could get myself this kind of ENF recordings. And the gentleman from the Met suggested that I just let my phone rest recording for 10 minutes. And that's what I did. I used my laptop, actually. I set it on record with the microphone on, capturing some secret conversations. But in the end, I eventually got these nice ENF curves. Again, that's also an opportunity to show the refinement features, so that's a standard spectrogram, and that's the refined spectrogram. Okay, and to conclude, not quite yet, on the analysis capacities, there is also something called a 3D view in SpectraLayers, which is not something that you use every day, but there are some use case, and this is actually quite personal story, but sometimes at home I have some faulty power supply units in some device like TV, video projectors, etc. And this kind of faulty PSU units starts emitting high-pitched tune, and this can drive you crazy pretty quickly because it's pretty hard to locate this continuous tune. And so I had this idea to use SpectraLayers, opening the laptop, starting recording, and then moving around my apartment, and using the 3D view. Well, so the idea is to find where the tune is the most powerful. And it's quite hard to see when you look at just the colors of the spectrogram. It's not quite obvious. But if you use the 3D view of the spectrogram, then it becomes much more obvious how the power changed over time. So combined with the refinement algorithm and the 3D view, you can basically refine your perceptions of the spectrogram and how power change over time. And finally, to conclude on the analysis capacities of the spectrogram and spectral layers, I did this multiple layer, so yeah, that's the core concept of spectral layers, having multiple layers. So that's the ENF recording that I did yesterday. And I pretend that this is a clean official recording of the actual frequencies of the grid. It's just actually the same recording that I've cleaned manually. And having this capacity of showing 2 layers or more at the same time allows me to then perfectly find the exact onset time, the exact synchronization time between the 2 layers. So that shows the capacity of spectral rendering in SpectraLayers. And then let's move on to the processing capacities of SpectraLayers. So the first modules that made it into SpectraLayers were pretty standard algorithm, like denoise, declick. I'm just gonna show two very quick examples about that because you are already very familiar with such processes. So the denoising. So you register a noise profile and then you run it. I should probably do that before. And then with the noise reduction. So that's some basic algorithmic processing, which you're pretty familiar with. And the same goes with declick, where it is going to find the clicks inside the spectrogram.
It had some difficulties
So the declick is going to look at the spectrogram where there are some bursts of frequency vertically and remove them.
It had some difficulties
So yeah, pretty standard algorithm. There are all the classics like the AES, etc. And now moving on to some more advanced processing. So going back to my slide, my only slide. AI processing. So we're going to see a couple examples in different use cases. Denoising around voice to start with. Denoising, devoicing, I'll explain that later. Dereverberating and declipping. Denoising, let's start with something not too hard.
And longed to be, he became the echo of a saga, the record of teens of romance and adventure.
So voice, birds, some wines at some point. So voice denoising is based on some AI module. And I'm going to use a moderate profile for that, a moderate module for voice denoising. So let's have a listen.
To be, he became the echo of a saga, the record of teens of romance and adventure. His tough honesty condemns him to a solitary and difficult.
So that works pretty well because you don't have a noise that's too strong to obscure the speech itself. But now if you have to deal with more complex examples, like those two here. So here, heavy background noise.
They did not replace it with a conviction for culpable homicide.
So if I use the same model, moderate noise,
They did not replace it with a conviction for culpable homicide.
that's nice, but we still have some residuals. So let's try the strong model.
They did not replace it with a conviction for culpable homicide.
So these are two different kind of architecture for non-voice denoising, and this one was actually trained on, excuse me, pretty heavy noise. Another examples.
Worn through at the knees, he took me by surprise.
So again, if I use the moderate noise suppression,
Worn through at the knees, he took me by surprise. Eden's
so that works, but again, we have some residuals in the high frequencies.
worn through at the knees, he took me by surprise. Eating spinach.
So you might be, so it works much better, but you might be wondering why not using all the time the strong noise profile. It can be a little more destructive and aggressive regarding the speech extraction. So that's a balance that you have to find between two different AI models depending on the use case and scenario that you have. Moving on to the second use case, which I call devoicing. So you might be wondering, why would I want to remove the voice from a voice recording? I actually, the use case is actually to when you have two voices, the main voices that you're recording, but someone else is speaking in the background. And that's confusing for the voice denoising models because it looks for actual noise like cars, tree, wine, birds, etc. And it's not going to remove someone speaking in the background because it looks like voice as well. So there are some special AI models that are trained just for this task of separating two simultaneous speakers. And this one is going to look for the most predominant voice and erase the voice in the background. So I'm just gonna play it. And then, did I play? No, I didn't. It did not play the example. I should probably show you the before.
I'm here at night, I think, around 8 o'clock, and George is helping me out with the program of mine, doing assembly language, and I'm having a lot of problems with my getting it working soon.
So after the voice devoicing, or voice denoising with a voice profile.
I'm here at night, I think, around 8 o'clock, and George is helping me out with the program of mine, doing assembly language, and I'm having a lot of problems. I hope I get it working soon.
So you may notice that all the frequencies from the secondary voice are gone, but some of the high frequency is in the top frequencies here are kept because it's much harder to discriminate between two voices purely based on the higher noise. But at least for the frequency part at the bottom, up to 4K, all the secondary voice is gone. But so when you do this, you can also do the reverse. You just have to subtract the result that you get from the initial recording. And then I asked him to remove the most predominant voice and only keep the secondary voice. And that's what you get.
Hong Kong's premier author Wong Kar-wai investigates how to orchestrate fate and falling in love. The exquisite and beautiful Leslie Chun written.
So yeah, again, pretty clean separation of the main voice. Some confusion in the higher frequency here, but that's enough to make it intelligible in the both scenario. Moving on to the next case, which is de-reverberation.
Can I ask real quick? Sure. I have to press you. Was this sample in the training data set?
No.
Very good.
But yeah, good point. De-reverberation. Question here.
Robert,
Yeah.
quick question. Do you have a profile for that speaker? Do you explicitly?
No, it's not. It's generic. It works with. It just looks for two different voice profiles, but you don't have to pre-train it before.
Select.
Or don't have to select it at this point. I will show you another use case with selection then. That use case, so a lot of reverbs on voice.
I got a call last year from the governor of Minnesota. Mr. Bailey says,
the Japanese distribution system is more complex than its American counterpart, and Japanese may be harder to learn than English.
So I'm summoning the voice, the reverb, noise, the reverb, the process, and applying it. Also, this one is generic. It will find out itself. It's been trained on different kinds of reverbs, so it can figure out itself. You don't have to pre-train or set some specific selection.
I got a call last year from the governor of Minnesota. Mr. Bailey says,
the Japanese distribution system is more complex than its American counterpart, and Japanese may be harder to learn than English.
So just again before.
Minnesota
is more complex than its American counterpart, and Japanese may be harder to learn than English.
And the last example regarding voice processing is declipping. So again, yet another AI model trained specifically on clipped example and how to properly reconstruct them. So actually clipping and declipping is quite challenging because it's pretty easy to reconstruct a waveform that looks like it's been declipped. But when you listen to it, it's not that common that it actually sounds like it's supposed to sound. Usually, most of declipping algorithms are mostly cosmetic and not so much about reconstructing the actual intended sound. So I've chosen some pretty iffy clipped examples. Here's one.
Well, you see the high profile in the media. Horses are killed by ballot.
And I'm gonna apply voice clip to that.
They receive a high profile in the media. Horses are killed by ballot.
So yeah, pretty good job at reconstructing the clipped example. And I have another similar one.
I got a bit of Spectral players as I had expected. I would have a hammer in the crowd.
Again, declipping it.
I got a bit of Spectral players as I had expected. I would have a hammer in the crowd.
It's pretty interesting to see how the spectrogram looks before and after. When an audio gets clipped, you can notice that it pretty much spreads vertically the power from the lower frequencies across all the vertical axis of frequencies. And so when you declip it, all this power that was spread across the vertical axis goes back to where it belongs at the bottom and main frequencies. So that's it, I think, for the specifically voice processing modules. And let's talk about unmixing, because this is also what makes SpectraLayers. The ability to deconstruct sound without being destructive, meaning that everything that gets, every layer that gets decomposed into different layers, when you sum all the layers, you go back to your original file. And I'm going to start with an example that we've seen earlier, which is speech with birds in the background. So, noise. So this time I'm not gonna just remove the background noise. I'm gonna separate it into two different layers using unmixed noise speech. So, as you can see now, we have two colors in the spectrogram. Pink is for the vocals, the speech, and yellow is for everything that is in the background. So, well, you've already heard the main speech part.
And longed to be, he became the echo of a saga.
And we now also have this noise layer. And when I sum them, so when I click this button, it says composite layer view. It means it's a sum of all the layers, and it's a quick way to see if the sum of all your layers are the same as your example before. So when I sum the layers, this is what I see. And you can see that there is an history panel here at the bottom. If I go back to my first step, which is the original layer here, you can see when I go back and forth between the before and after unmixing, it's exactly the same spectrogram between the two, which is the proof that nothing was destroyed during the process. And I think this is possibly a way to. So the thing with those AI models is that they are still black box, and you don't fully know what happens inside. You only get the results. But if you get a decomposition of your original file, and that you are able to listen to the first layer, and hear that there are no residuals from the background noise, and if you listen to the noise layer, and that you are able to see and hear that there are no residuals from the voice, I think, I would not say it's a proof, but I think that it makes some strong case for the fact that the AI did not start inventing crazy frequencies. Moving on to other unmixing examples.
Quick, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, when you're running these AI modules, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it just splitting the signal into component parts, or is any of it actually generative?
It's splitting. So it takes the original spectrogram and it produces a mask.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
I've inverted null multiple times with like 3, 4, 5 layers. And I don't care what the software says, I just render it and then invert it and then look if there's any signal.
So another unmixing example, this time it's a module that's specifically trained to unmix crowd noise from, I would say, content. Content can be music on stage, it can be a speaker, it can be some specific distinctive noise. And so I'm going to play first the example. In that case, it's a concert. So it's a pretty loaded spectrogram with a lot happening inside. So let's unmix the crowd. So yeah, call the secondary layer foreground, for lack of a better word.
Robin?
Yeah.
Can you put the residue of any process in a separate layer?
So I'm not sure I understand the
For
question.
example, the river. When you took out the river,
are
you able to send the river to another layer?
Yes.
Technically you can. There's no straight path like a mix river, but if you do it manually, meaning that you can first you do the reverberation, then you do a copy of your original layer, and then you apply the inverse of the river. Then indeed you get the.
You should do it for us.
Yeah, well, sure.
We'll get him on it, but the difference is, it's easy to generate.
I understand. But
Yeah,
it would be great.
But I think I would get lost in my roadmap if I do that now. But I will sure let me think about it at the end of the demo. So anyway, we've decomposed the concert into two different layers here. First, the crowd. And then the foreground. So you can probably hear that there are some residuals from the music in the crowd layers. And we'll come back to that later when we are going to see all the tools on the side. But for now, let's just keep the result as is from the AI. Another module, okay, this is an interesting one, unmix multiple voices. So I have an example here where I have 4 different speakers. Yeah, this one. So let's play the example.
This is a demo with 4 different speakers, including simultaneous speakers.
You know, that the boy was out of pocket.
Could have done it more, because I think
I've never stepped on
if you get
anybody
successful in comedy, you will go into a television series or film series.
私たちは1990年という
This concludes our unmixing demo.
So what I'm going to do is pop up the diagram for the unmix multiple voices. I'm going to start from scratch so that you can see the process. I'm just selecting a short sample from the first voice, calling it Robin. Second voice, let's say male 1. Another voice here, male 2, and finally the Japanese part. And so when so it now knows it registered the X vectors that was the subject of a talk a couple of days ago. And now it looks through the whole file, all those different X vectors that it registered, and it separates it into different layers. So you can see that we end up with the Robin layer, where I talk.
This is a demo with 4 different speakers, including simultaneous speakers. This concludes our unmixing demo.
So it probably found that I was speaking at start and at the end. Male 1, so the interesting part here is that they overlap originally.
Was out of pocket.
Could have done it more, because I think
I've never stepped on
if you get
anybody
successful.
So I'm soloing male 1.
You know, that the boy was out of pocket then. You know, but no, I've never stepped on anybody else's moan.
And secondary voice.
Could have done it more, because I think what happens in America, if you get successful in comedy, you will go into a television series or a film series.
Is the recording stereo or mono?
It's mono. Yeah. Yeah, as you can see here, there's only one channel, and it says mono. Yeah. And finally the Japanese part.
私たちは1990年という
Yeah, and it got a short bit from my own voice.
You record that in the acoustic environment.
Sorry?
Were all the sources played in an acoustic environment where you recorded, or were they electronically mixed together?
Oh, in that case, it's a made-up example where I took different speakers and put them in the same recording. They were cleanly recorded. But that being said, it also works to some extent when you have conditions like a bit of reverbs or noise reduction. But in that case, I would recommend to first unmix the speakers, plural, from the background noise, and then using the speakers layer, maybe apply a bit of the reverberation first, and then do the unmix multiple voices. That's the thing with SpectraLayers, is that you can work with layers, sublayers, and sub-layers. Yeah.
Can you manually adjust it afterwards?
Adjust what part?
Well, say for example, it's 90% accurate, but it needs slight adjustment.
He wants you
Yeah.
to show him the brush.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Then maybe I should jump right to that part.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
all he wanted was like go pick the kick drum
Okay,
from
okay.
Sandman and then send it back and forth to another layer,
All right.
so that they can see your discernment of it.
Yeah, so
guided by that AI.
that's the original design of SpectraLayers, is to be able to manually fix all the results from the AI and just not ends up with whatever comes out of it. So in that case, the unmixed crowd noise, let's just hear again that part with the crowd. So the boom, boom, boom in the bottom frequencies is obviously not from the crowd itself, but from the kick in the drum set. So I'm going to use, in that case, the transfer tool.
And if you do notice, we can zoom in further and plus minus.
And I'm going to rebalance it to the proper layer. So when I'm painting here, let me just zoom in a bit. When I'm painting here, I'm not erasing data. I'm just transferring it to another layer. I just solo it so it's easier to see. But now if I play this part again, well, this is quick and dirty, but so you can see and understand what's happening. So you still have some high frequency from the kick, but definitely the bottom part got reassigned to the foreground. And now if I play the foreground again, before the rebalancing, and then after, it got a little more kick that was balanced to the crowd layer by mistake. Yeah.
Can you invert polarity of a layer?
Yes.
Well, I can, but what do you expect to achieve? Well, I can, is the question, can you revert the polarity? Then yes.
But you have to process it, or it's just about that?
It's just about it. Let me quickly show you. I just duplicate the Japanese layer here, so I have,
okay.
Yeah. And then I'm summing both layers. So right now we have double the layers because I did not reverse anything. But here's the phase button, and when I click it...
Why phase? Polarity.
It's
it's a debate.
Polarity.
It's not the same.
Yeah, right.
You're
correct.
So going back to the multiple speakers example, it's not done yet. So we have separated the voices, and what's also interesting is that we can now transcribe them. So I'm just going to go with the fast mode so that it doesn't take too much time. So here I've transcribed first my own layers. I'm not sure how readable it is on screen, but it says here.
This is a demo with 4 different speakers, including simultaneous speakers.
And at the end, when you go to the transcribe, this concludes our unmixing demo at the bottom.
Concludes our unmixing demo.
So when you zoom out, it concatenates all the words into a single sentence, and when you zoom in, it assigns each word approximately where it's supposed to be in the spectrogram. So I transcribed layer 1. Now I'm going to transcribe layer 2. I'm going to transcribe layer 3. And the Japanese one, I let it on auto, apply. And so I end up with transcriptions for my 4 different layers, which are my 4 different speakers. And I can see the transcript here in the window, this window. So we can see what everyone is saying. I can export those transcriptions in different formats such as SRT, TXT, CSV. And if I want, I can set the name of the speakers before he speaks. So you end up with a transcription with the time codes and the name of the speakers and what they say. And as you can see, it concatenates the words to form full sentences each time. But I can edit those because, as you said, the AI can be faulty, and I can write, I can type anything here. So let's see. You see, you know that the I don't know. Let's say you care, and then you see that in the transcript it kept the same time code, but it replaced the word know by care. And to further go with this transcription feature, here's a long transcript. So I'm not going to run this in real time. I've pre-processed it. So it's a 45-minute speech, boring speech about the economy, I think.
Thank you very much, Dean Love. It's great to be here today. Thanks to everyone for coming out. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to be...
And so this transcribe feature applied to long speech allows you to look for specific keywords like define, tactic, economy. It's gonna filters with all the sentences that contains the words economy.
The economy added in an app if the economy evolves broadly, as well as others engaged in the economy.
And so on, jobs, for instance.
And 3 million jobs were created, even as inflation. The economy added in an average of 2.
But what we are really looking for is the economist confessing. And
then I killed him and buried his body in the backyard.
That's how you get economists in jail and you save yourself 40 minutes of speech. All right, moving on. Yeah.
What languages are supported?
It actually supports a lot, but the most supported language are, let me check a mixed transcription, like a dozen languages. So we have English, which has the best performance. French is okay. German's pretty good. Italian good as well. Spanish pretty good. High or higher than English maybe. Japanese, I can say. Russian, I can say. Chinese. Obviously Japanese, Russian, Chinese, and Portuguese. I think they are going to get lower score than the other languages, but you can get something, and Andrew will show you some example with that.
Do you have any numbers for that? Pretty good is not something I can...
Sorry?
Is there a word error rate about this? Do you have that somewhere? Or?
Yeah, there's a table somewhere with this error rate. Yeah.
I'm just going to butt in. I've run into skeptical prosecutors, and you do not need to use any process at all to send anything to or from a layer. And you can, and these selections are not magical. It's like, so you're saying what is sibilance and what is a bird chirping? That's just a matter of discernment. You can run the AI, look at it, but you could have already made that selection and compared them yourself running these sort of tests. But your work product or deliverables do not have to include any AI processing whatsoever. It's as much as, it's as good as your brush or your selection tool, and sending them back and forth and A/Bing, it gives you insight into what layer you're working with when you send back and forth.
So yeah, to conclude on AI models specifically trained for specific tasks, there is one last example that I wanted to show, which at first doesn't seem like it's for forensics, but I do actually think that there are a use case for forensics. It's the unmixing of songs. So I'm gonna play this example. I left some stems unchecked, and I just used the high quality instead of the extreme, so that we save time for the demo. But so this is gonna unmix the whole song into all the different instruments that are listed there, and then we are going to do a second step. But first, let's have a listen to the different layers.
Darling, when I hold you, don't you know I feel the same? Yeah.
The drums.
Yeah.
Then the guitar. Not perfect. The piano. Again, good but not perfect, but you know that's expected when you have so many instruments playing at the same time. It's kind of a worst case scenario. And the bass. And what goes to over is what the AI was able to identify as an instrument And that's our complementary layers that makes it so that the sum of all goes makes the original. So,
Robin,
yeah.
You can have in a layer the entire original file and then
yes,
other.
Yeah.
So you can always check
Always.
the
So,
sum to the original.
And again, here's the proof, so minimizing the layers. So they are all there. I'm summing them, so that's how it looks. And I'm also summing the channels so that you can better see. So that right now you can see two channels at the same time. And I'm gonna go back and forth between the original file when I opened it. Here you can see there's only one layer. And after the unmixing, you can see several layers. And you can see in the spectrogram that nothing changes, maybe some shading at the end, but that's just the finishing touch. So yeah,
could you demonstrate, like there's an errant hi-hat in the piano track? Show us how to select and send that to the percussion track.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna listen to a couple layers and see if there are some things to fix. Yeah. So maybe the transient here is not fully from the piano because it sounds a little harsh. Again, so I'm clicking here and I'm gonna send it back to the drums because that's my opinion. But it might belong to the drums, considering the timing and considering the strength of the transient. So I'm using the transfer brush. I'm selecting the drums layer, and I'm sending back that transient back to the drum layer. And here, after, you can see in the drums layer that it got back the information from the piano layer. And again, after the transfer, let's check again that the sum corresponds to the original. So when I open the file, when I unmix the sound, and when I do the transfer of some sound. And okay, so this demo goes further. We have the vocals now. But there are two kinds of vocals in this recording, the lead vocals and the backing vocals. So that's a nice example where you further unmix the layers. I'm going to use unmix chorus, apply the module to the vocals layer only, and have a look to my tree of layers here. Now you can see that there are two sub-layers under the vocals layer, the lead vocals and the backing vocals. So let's listen to the lead vocals first.
Darling, when I hold you, don't you know I feel the same? Yeah.
And the backing vocals. And that's an example where we can indeed do some refinements, I think, because...
Send Axel back, and then you can A/B it and make decisions as to whether you like it. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that there are a bit of backing vocals in there, so I'm just, I'm using the wrong brush.
There's not crazy selections to make yourself either. Those are not difficult. Like, the shapes aren't that complex.
So yeah,
you don't even have
those
AI can guide you.
backing layers.
Sorry.
And now we have the clean vocals here. And again, nothing was destroyed in the process. And so I think this use case, it might not sound like there are use cases for that in forensics, but there are use cases where you have songs playing, people talking about over the music where there is a lead singer, and if you combine all those modules together, all those processes, you can get some powerful separation. And to go further, so those were the AI modules that were specifically trained for specific tasks. But there are some generic decomposition that are quite useful as well. And these are unmixed multi-channel content, unmixed mid-slide, unmixed components, and unmixed level. So I'm going to go through each of those. So unmixed multi-channel content, as the name implies, requires to have at least 2 channels or more. So in that case, I have a string musician, So it's a stereo recording where you have people passing by, and the player is located in a specific position in space. And I'm gonna use the unmix multi-channel content. Use one of the selection tools that are at my disposal here, and select just a bit of the notes from the instrument. So if I play it, that's just the fundamental of one of the notes that are played. So I now analyze the selection. It calculates the ratio in the left channel and the right channels. And if I apply this, and let's see, or maybe you should set a little more tolerance. All right, yeah, that's better. So the target content. And the surrounding content. And again, the proof that we did not lost information in between when I open the file and when I apply the unmixing. So this works with 2 channels, 3 channels, any combination of channels that you can have, as long as the mics are positioned at different places or oriented in different manners, so that the content that you are actually trying to extract has a specific position in space, in the multi-channel space, compared to what you don't want to keep. Then I have, what is the next process module? Unmix mid-side. So you might be familiar with mid-side processing, especially if you work in music. So this is not a musical example, this is not a real example in any way, but this is to demonstrate a specific capacity of SpectraLayers in terms of unmix mid-side. So just a quick reminder, the mid-side algorithm that you can find in some audio editors, DAWs or plugins, it takes an average of the left and right channel usually to produce a mid-channel, which is supposed to be the content which is in the center. And then it does a subtraction between this mid-average and the over layer, the over channel. And it gives you the side content. Typically, the mid content is supposed to be in music, the vocals, or in movies, the actors speaking. And the side content usually gets things like the over instrument, the reverbs, the special effects in the case of a movie. And the reason I fabricated this example, so first, let me clarify, this is the left channel, which also contains some mid, and this is the right channel, which contains right and also the mid. So if I apply a standard mid-side algorithm, which is based on waveform, I end up with this result, where I'm following the mid channel right now. I do have the mid content, as expected, but since the mid is produced from an average of the left and right channel, I also end up with residuals from the left channels and the right channels. And to me, that's not really the effect that you would expect if you really want to extract and separate the mid from the side. And similarly, the side, it got the left and right content, and it doesn't have the mid content, and that's the expected result. But unfortunately, you end up with both left and right channels mixed together, so it's really a general side content and not without without discrimination between the left and right. So now I'm going to do the same, going back to the original file, but I'm going to use the expanded mode, which is not doing the waveform calculation, but the spectral calculation. And when I apply it, I end up with a mid layer which only contains the mid content without residuals from the left channel and the right channels. And the side layers contains, as expected, the left content and the right content, but they are properly distributed in their own channels. So you do have a stronger mid-side separation that you have with standard mid-side algorithm.
ProLogic decoder.
Hmm?
It's a Dolby ProLogic decoder.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not aware of that. Then unmixed components. So the components, what I call components in sound, is 3 parts: noise, tonals, like horizontal frequencies, and transients. So this is a good example where we have the 3 of those. So unmixed components. So again, some generic algorithm which is not tied to the kind of content that you're working on. So I end up with a noise layer. A transient layer. And a tonal layer. And this is the kind of unmixing, generic unmixing, that you can use before or after using a specifically trained AI for some tasks. It's a great refinement of the unmixing process, where so you ended up after the results of an AI with quite what you wanted, but then you want to go further down into the unmixing stages and get to the core of it, like this noise, tonal, and transients layers, and only work on specific layers. You either only touch the transients or the tonals or the noise. It allows you to be very selective of what you do within your sound without touching anything of the rest. And finally, unmixed level. So, well, this is pretty basic, but it's nice to have as well. So this is a process that's gonna unmix the sound into the high power, high spectral power, and low spectral power. So I can set, for instance, I'm selecting a bit of noise here, and I'm gonna analyze it. So it analyzes it and sets a certain threshold value corresponding to that selection. And then when I apply the unmixing, well, this was maybe a little too strong. Let's review and see how I can adjust this.
It's faster just.
Alright, let's try. Okay, stronger maybe. Yeah. Alright, let's go with that. So yeah, I end up with a high level layer which contains like the siren from the boat. And a low level layer which is made, well, the background noise that we can hear. I think you got some of the siren maybe, there's some residuals from the siren, but not too much. And yeah, that's another way to, that's looking at spectrograph from all possible angles, from the power angles, from the components angles, from the multi-channels angles, and that's just creating slice of your sound without destroying it. And yeah, it allows you to be very selective then when you do your edits.
Robin, does the history opens in a tree from, I mean, do you have a historic layers, a history for each layer?
It's a global history.
So if I process one layer and want to go back to something I did with another layer, I have to go back everything?
Yeah, and it's a linear story. So if you go back and if you created some layers, meanwhile it will revert those layers as well.
To answer your question, no, there needs what you need. You have to go pick out from the larger. It's like one global hunk, you have to, in order to properly report it, you have to find the process that you want to copy it, place it into your documentation, go to the next one. But that's not too much of a price to pay. You get a more.
There's a quick handy button here at the bottom of the story here. Yeah, there's a button called Duplicate Project, which allows you to save the state of your current project into another tab. So now I have 2 different tabs containing the same layers. And that's a quick way to make experiments. You create a copy, you do your experiments, and then you can go back to your first project. Nice. So yeah, well, we've seen already the transfer tools, and I would say it's useful to fix the mistakes from the AI. And the last thing that I wanted to show you in terms of tools are the selection tools. So the Unmixed Crowd tab, where is it? 2 minutes. Oh, yeah. From here. Yeah, I think that's not it. So I'm just gonna return the file and just Unmixed Crowd nouns. It's lost somewhere, and I don't have time to find it. So let's just run the unmixing again. And this time I'm gonna focus. You see the whistle from the crowd here. There are no specific modules for that. So that's where you start manually selecting things. And that was the core concept of SpectraLayers at first, being able to manually extract sounds that you can see visually. I mean, if you can see it, usually you can hear it and you can extract it. So I'm going to create a sublayer here. And I'm going to use, so here you can see there is a frequency selection tool, which smartly follows any frequency in the spectrum. So basically, if I click here and spawn my mouse, it will track how the frequency changes over time. And there is another variation of that frequency selection tool, which is called the harmonic selection tools. And it selects several frequencies at the same time. So let's see if I can find an appropriate window size. Yeah, this looks like.
You also use the good old lasso.
Yeah, or you could use, you could use the lasso, but just wanted to show these harmonic selection tools which selects.
The harmonic selection goes only upwards or it goes downwards too?
It can go both ways. As you can see here, I'm already on the second harmonics, or the first harmonics, how you define that. And you can set what's the master rank. The master rank is the frequency that you think you are hovering, and then it's going to go select the fundamental and everything above. So now when I play just this selection, it just plays whatever I selected, which is some results, and I hit Control X, cut, and then I go to the secondary layer, and then Command V, and I end up with this layer containing. And if I go to the crowd layer, pretty much almost all of it is gone. I should go a little further to select some of the residuals here. But, that's how you can manually extract and decompose yourself without the help of AI or algorithm what's in the spectrogram. So that's the core. I think you had a pretty good overview. And just to conclude on SpectraLayers, I'm gonna finish with automation. And you can automate all those modules that you've seen here. So they are categorized in 3 categories. Unmixing modules, utility modules, and restoration modules. All those modules, you can form a chain of modules. So for instance, it allows you to do some pretty powerful automation. So for instance, I'm gonna start with unmix song. So it's gonna create all the layers that you've seen before. And then I'm gonna add unmixed chorus. I should tell unmixed chorus that it should apply to the vocals layer. So as you can see now in the chain, it first unmixes the sound, into all the instruments. Then it targets the vocals layers and unmix it into the lead vocals and the backing vocals. And then I'm just gonna slightly reduce the gain on the backing vocals. And in one click, I have this song unmixed, then the vocals unmixed, then the backing layers, the backing vocals with the gain reduced or augmented, whatever. And I could also apply each of those modules to a specific selection. So for instance, the gain, I only want the gain to be applied, let's say, in the lower frequencies. So once you have this module chain, one click process your file. And if you have several files, this is complemented by another feature which is called batch process, where you write whatever numbers of files that you want from your hard drive. You set a module chain, the one that I've just set right now. And then you can choose if you want to export a mixdown of the results, just a single wave file, which is the sum of all the layers that are being created in the process. If you want to export a SpectraLayers project so that you keep all the layers ordered in a tree, or if you want to export layers, meaning you export multiple wave files from each input wave file, you export multiple wave files corresponding to the results of the whole of all the unmixing process that might happen during the modules chain. And so this concludes the overview, the large overview of SpectraLayers. There is more, obviously, because I tried to focus this demo on forensics specifically, but I think that will give you some good idea of what it is.
Does this software have a API where you could submit several files to it?
Sort of, yeah. It's not documented, but it has it. Yeah. Yeah.
If I am using a Magic Wand selection tool, and I've got, let's say, a loud sound like a voice with, on top of an ambient background, depending on the tolerance, if I use a really low tolerance, I can pull out some of the voice, and it sounds as though there's still the ambience underneath where that voice was. Have I actually made a Z-axis selection?
Well, technically, there are no z-axis, but that's a good question because it brings a point that I didn't mention in SpectraLayers, is that since a couple versions, you can apply fading to your selections. So, for instance, if I'm doing a selection here, you can see hard borders, but if I right-click here, I can adjust time and frequency fading. So that's sort of a 3D selection in a way, but not in the way that you've mentioned, but it allows you to specify precise, smooth area around your selection. And the same goes for all the selection tools here. For instance, I have a selection brush that merges with the existing square selection that I've made before. And you can also adjust your selections fading afterwards. Modify selection, like time fading, I can add time fading or frequency fading, etc. So, yeah.
And to the point that you're getting at, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that similar to the tolerance setting in Magic Wand? When you're talking about
okay, so let's pop up the Magic Wand. The tolerance setting just set the how wide it should spread, but it doesn't set a fading area. There is no fading area in the settings of the Magic Wand. So okay, I'm using the Magic Wand. You can see that it has odd borders, but if I wanted to, I could then add fading to that, and there is a special new tool in SpectraLayers 11 just about that, which allows you to paint fadings around your selection. So I would suggest then to do a large selection, like with a high tolerance, using the magic brush when you select your voice content, and then you can apply fading to this selection so that the core of the frequency, the vocals that you're trying to extract, is set at 100% of the selection, and then it fades slowly so that the noise that is on the side, right on the side of the vocal frequency, is attenuated compared to the center of your selection.
And to get to your point,
Hey, guys.
sorry.
We're cutting into Andrew's portion of all this stuff too, so that's great.
Right.
Obviously, awesome conversation. Continuing on, but I don't want Andrew to miss out.
Oh yeah, right.
He's
I
able
didn't
to
check
do
the time
so.
though.
So I'll walk up here. Andrew's going right into just all related to Spectral Layers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
No problem. You'll have basic. That should do it. All right, folks. Well, thank you, Robin, for that deep dive into Spectral Layers. Nice to see a fellow Guns N' Roses and Metallica fan. A couple others in the room too. So, okay, let me just, it's fine that went over a little bit because I, as a card-carrying procrastinator, wasn't sure I could fill my entire hour, so it's all good. All right. Presentation of audio evidence in civil trials with AI-assisted software tools. Now you saw the technical overview of SpectraLayers 10 or 11 is just released. I'm also going to give a brief tour of some of my uses of Mathematica 14. And obviously we don't have anyone from Wolfram here, but maybe someday, or maybe there's someone from Wolfram here. Anyone? No? Okay. So this over here on the right is a 3D spectrogram that I computed in Mathematica. And the intention was just to have a graphic, but you'll see more of that later. I'm not sure that does it justice on this screen, but it is what it is. Okay, my qualifications: Andrew Waters, attorney in California. I've been practicing for 18 years, and I have done 36 trials, including 5 jury trials, 31 court trials. I have my own small law firm, and my practice is evenly split between general civil litigation and complex family law. Half of my trials have been family law trials, and of those, half have been domestic violence trials. So I've done 9 DV trials, and that's going to tie in a little bit later today. I also have a right brain independent user copy that I found myself using about 10 years ago when I first heard of Spectral Layers. I didn't get around to getting Spectral Layers until several years later. But that's the music is how I ended up with those programs. As for Mathematica, I have a research and development hobby, and that's how I came to acquire Mathematica back in 2013. This 3D self-portrait on the right, I mean, it's not Van Gogh, but it's a computer vision project, and I just thought that was a whimsical addition. Disclaimer, not a serious audio expert, so the techniques you're going to see are very basic, but that's not the point. The use of these programs and the democratization of the tools has enabled me to leapfrog my peers in my view, and what I'm doing, at least in civil trials, is way beyond what most other attorneys do already. So maybe applying some of Robin's expertise in the future, I can extend my techniques. But just a mild-mannered attorney from San Mateo. Legal background. This presentation will focus on California law, because that's where I'm admitted, but principles are applicable in other states as well as under the model rules of the American Bar Association. Civil trials, it's no secret, represent a somewhat lower standard of proof and effort than criminal trials. Despite consistent guidance from the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court in California, trial courts and family law in particular simply don't take the rules of evidence as seriously as they are taken in even regular civil cases. And of course, criminal cases are a more stringent view of evidence due to the likelihood of appeal and other concerns. The trial courts in California that I've seen justify their lower standards by simply stating that family law is a court of equity, which is true. It is a court of equity. And they also say usually that they are, as a fact finder, since there's no jury in family law, can judge the weight of all admissible evidence by themselves and there's no jury to become misled or confused by the evidence. And in my experience, that's arguably true, but it still doesn't excuse sometimes the more relaxed level of seriousness on the rules of evidence. My challenges that I've experienced in analyzing and presenting audio evidence in civil cases and trials include, number one, the expense of an expert such as many people in this room at AES. The cost is cost prohibitive in many cases. No matter what people say when they come into my office, they're always on a budget. So if a case might cost in the tens of thousands of dollars, like $50,000 or $100,000, which is probably typical for a divorce case or even a domestic violence matter sometimes, the clients often struggle to justify spending $10,000 or more of their litigation budget on an audio engineering expert. Other challenges are that the quality of the recordings is often low or even unusable, and consumer phones are the most common recording devices. The voice memo or the video feature, often they're in pockets or they're muffled or the audio is clipped in some fashion or otherwise impaired. So that heightens the importance of having a software tool to work with. Next, lawyers are not technically proficient, and they often don't know or don't even present evidence they have because they don't know how to do so. See a couple nods in the audience. But this is ultimately a failing in legal education because lawyers are not expected to be technically proficient in what they do, or even how to use this technology that they do have access to. In the rare cases that I've seen where the other lawyer uses audio or video evidence, it's not effectively presented or as impactful as it could be, mainly because of the technical failings of the attorney. There are few, if any, software tools that meet the needs of legal professionals, and they are inconsistent with what people expect to see or what people expect to present in trials. So I'm one of the few who even knows what Sequoia and Samplitude are, for example. The closest fit for presentation of audio evidence at trial or video evidence is the program called Trial Director. Anybody heard of Trial Director? One person? No, two people, okay. But Trial Director is not designed to incorporate other software views or explain the process of how an expert witness reached their conclusions. So if I had Trial Director, I would probably make screen recordings of what the programs are and set those in Trial Director. There are also ethical and compliance considerations for having an attorney present evidence at trial. So the general rule in California, at least, is that a lawyer may not testify in a jury trial in which the lawyer is representing a party, except in very, very limited circumstances. However, a lawyer may testify in a court trial with the client's consent or if the judge approves or does not object. So, presentation of audio evidence in a civil bench trial is a great example of when a lawyer can testify as a witness. Although it's unusual, it is not unusual to have a lawyer testify in the billings or their attorney fees, so it's possible. There are incentives to allow a lawyer to testify as an expert witness in a civil trial. In family law, there are fee-shifting provisions that allow the prevailing party in a family law, like domestic violence case, to receive attorney fees and expert costs from the other side. So there also are need-based attorney fees and costs, where your expert fees and your expert costs and attorney fees can be awarded in advance of a proceeding in order to ensure that there's access to representation. In general civil matters, there's something called a 998 offer in California, and there's probably an analog in many other states that can shift expert costs to the other party depending on the result of the case. I'll go over that in a second. The bottom line for my experience and practice has been that it's cheaper to have a technically proficient attorney present forensic audio evidence because fee shifting makes it more reasonable to expect the other side will agree to allow it. And I literally wrote my pitch to the opposing parties that I give in every case. Let me put it this way. If we have to hire an expert, the cost will be a lot higher on our side, and we'll be asking for that back when we win. So just let me do it. I'll give you the original, the enhanced, and explanation of what I did, and let's agree on a joint transcript of what the evidence shows. Believe it or not, that often works. Number one, it's a free look at my evidence that I'm going to present. It saves the other cost of hiring their own expert, at least at that stage. It allows them a free look of what, or a preview of what is going to come in the trial. In a jury trial, I had a recent case where we did a jury instruction with an AI-generated transcript, and we said, the judge said to the jury, "You are not required to accept the transcript as written. This is the defense side's best effort at accuracy. So you should make your own determination of what you hear." That's essentially the jury instruction. That also works when pitching this to the opposing party, because they don't have to pay for the cost. So let me go over briefly the 988 offered a compromise in the concept of the 998. The idea is that you have to beat the other side's offer, or else you'll pay their expert costs and other costs of litigation. So 988 offers are not available in family law, only other civil cases. The 988 offer is confusing, but at the same time makes sense. The example I give is, let's say you're the plaintiff and you think you can get $1 million if you win the trial, but you only have a 25% chance of winning. You send a 988 offer for $250,000. The other side either has to accept or reject the offer within 30 days, or it is deemed withdrawn. If you go on to win the trial and you do better than the $250,000, even by $1, then the defendant has to pay not only your damages that you won a trial, but your expert witness costs that you paid for your experts to testify at the trial, prepare and everything. So from the date of the offer forward, let's say you're the defendant in the same case. You think the plaintiff has a 20% chance of prevailing, so you offer $200,000. The plaintiff goes on to lose the case. The plaintiff in that scenario is responsible for the defendant's expert costs because they didn't beat the defendant's offer to compromise. The plaintiff in that scenario is responsible, and in some cases, like patent and technology cases, these expert costs can be staggering and even flip the result in the case. So the party who nominally wins is actually the loser in that case, losing party. The 988 offer, and I'm mentioning this because it is impactful and important, can have a substantial impact on the negotiations and result of any case in civil. It's not available in family law, but in civil cases. It's a strong incentive to settle. Expert cost shifting, including attorney fees of the expert witness attorney, are potentially recoverable as mandatory costs, not just as discretionary attorney fees. So like I said, 988 offer combined with the cost and even the threat of presenting audio evidence can flip the result or even cause actual settlement in the case. Now I'd like to turn to my use of Mathematica in civil trials. I've been a user of Mathematica since 2013 for unrelated research and development. The best use that I've found for it is to generate visual aids for trials, such as cash flow analyses and family law matters involving support. I'm going to take a little detour to one of my cases here. Now this is not audio evidence, but it is an example of a Mathematica notebook from the earlier days of my use of it. So there's a bunch of code here, and that's one of the disadvantages I'll talk about. And so I'm scrolling past the code, and I'm getting what is a tabular format data of bank statements that I've entered into the program. Once you have their initial balance, you take the cash in, cash out, ending balance, you can compute the net and visualize the cash flow with the charts I'm going to show you. So this boring table of data doesn't show anything to anyone within a few seconds of having to look at it. When we scroll down past more code and get to the actual graphic, here's what the data actually mean when you present it in graphic form. This shows the cash flow of the two parties when they were married for a 2-year period. Other than one large deposit and one large withdrawal, they had a continuous and consistent negative cash flow. And so this is a great use of Mathematica, and the parties in that case, it was impactful evidence. So that's just one sample of Mathematica used in an actual trial. I randomly decided back in 2020 to try out Mathematica and Wolfram Alpha, which has an AI component for transcribing audio files. And this came in handy in a DV trial that I had in 2021, where I had both SpectraLayers and Mathematica, but at that time SpectraLayers did not have transcription ability. So I had to use Mathematica for the transcript, and I presented the evidence with SpectraLayers. That was very impactful at that time. Let me show you, let's see what else I have here. The other Mathematica notebook I wanted to show you is this one. So I wrote this code block in Mathematica just to generate a visual aid for the court to see what a spectrogram looks like. Because now I can go in and explain, here's a spectrogram, here's the audio file, and this is what it looks like when you compute this. So I took it to the next step and I did a 3D spectrogram, which I'm very happy with. And that's just, it's not the point is not to show this actual spectrogram, it's to show a nice visual aid to give the court a sense of what this evidence looks like on a computer or when visualized from computer data. One of the challenges though when I do this is that with the code here, I mean, I can hide this, but I want people to see what the code is. But when I start talking about FFTs and other, matrix plot and other functions in Mathematica, their eyes usually glaze over. So there's not much point in getting to the code other than for credibility purposes of showing that I actually did this and this is the result. So that's a couple Mathematica notebooks. Advantages of Mathematica in civil trials that I found. Clear, coherent course of commands and code, or C5. In other words, everyone can see what was done with the notebook, and everyone, including opposing experts, can easily see and reproduce the results, or tweak the code if they so desire, if they have Mathematica or Wolfram Player. So I'll be animating those spectrograms in the future to have, along with like an audio, if it's just an audio track, I'll have an animated spectrogram playing, and I think that'll be even more effective in the future. But that requires a lot of compute due to the high resolution computations, so can't really do that on my laptop at the moment. The printable results and high resolution graphics are user-friendly, and I've had success with giant sizing them on printed poster boards and putting them on easels when I'm gesturing to them. And that's what I found is an effective static visual aid. It also has an extensive function library and documentation, and I showed you the sample spectrogram already. But it's overall a helpful program to have and useful program in civil trials. Disadvantages. Let's be honest, no one who's a layperson really understands the code that's on screen. Even many experts don't really understand someone else's code. So it's kind of hard to explain in layman's terms what's going on other than when they see the nice charts and graphics and I say that was computed from the audio data. Mathematica is also a very static program, not dynamic like SpectraLayers, which I'll get to. And it's helpful for using the printable exhibits in kind of a static trial presentation where I can pass out an exhibit binder full of exhibits and have charts and graphics in there. Sometimes the compute will hang or crash. There's no progress bar sometimes, which is not helpful during trials and can be damaging to both my credibility as well as the actual flow of the case. Interactivity is not really available, and resizing high-resolution graphics can cause unpredictable results like processing notebook contents or whatever the message is that you see, and there's no indication of how long you'll see that message. So Mathematica, I don't really put that on the screen in the trial, although it's great for generating the printable exhibits, and the images look really beautiful sometimes. Enter SpectraLayers. I find this to be a dynamic and audience-friendly visual presentation method. The demonstrations are certainly easier than Mathematica because you get visual feedback of whatever you're doing instantaneously, and it's in real time. It's also automatic transcription now in multiple languages, and the Russian language module was very helpful for a DD case I had, which I'll show you. The key feature that I found in SpectraLayers for my practice and cases is to unmix voices that are arguing against each other and solo each voice to see what they're both saying. And also, like Robin mentioned earlier, there's sometimes background music or other sounds playing in the background when these people are talking or arguing with each other or threatening each other. And it's critical what they said during that moment, and I can't determine that through any other means. So unmixing using the AI unmix feature has been my favorite addition to SpectraLayers. There are other advanced tools, but you heard about those earlier. I'm just scratching the surface with my demos about what I have done and what you will see. Most importantly, the SpectraLayers allows, in my work, easy narration and visual feedback of what is being done or has been done. So I could do, for example, a screen recording and show the other side's expert what I did in the exact sequence, and then they can hopefully reproduce the same result. So, disadvantages of SpectraLayers in trials. No audit log.
Yet.
my most requested feature, Robin.
Yeah, that's coming.
Yeah, so, and also, as the gentleman over here pointed out, in his question, there's no tree level, there's no tree in the program, so there's no multi-level undo and redo, and you have to audition something in a new layer or else in a new project in order to see what will happen, and then you can go back to your previous project and repeat the same steps. It's also not really printable or exportable because it's on the screen and it has a dark background. I can't really, I mean, I could reverse that, but I don't take screenshots of that and then print them out like I do with Mathematica. So it's not really effective as a static presentation tool like Mathematica is. So these are both useful in their appropriate spheres of what they do. There's also, of course, the black box of AI processing, but you saw Robin demonstrate that there's no destruction of any data here. It's all non-destructively sliced into different layers, and once you sum them together, you get exactly the same as the original. So I think that's proof, Robin. That's proof, not just a conclusion, but it is what it is. How does this actually look in core? I'm going to do two demos for you, two sample cases. The first is domestic violence video evidence, which I extracted the audio track from and enhanced with spectral layers. Trigger warning: anybody who is upset by domestic violence, as everyone should be, but anyone who's emotionally disturbed by this type of video should have returned or whatever they want to do. I'm scratching the surface of these AI tools. The audio was certainly helpful to the judge in her decision, and the opposing party agreed to allow the evidence. My client ended up losing, but the evidence was at least effectively presented. Let's take a detour to my Exhibit B from that case with the original video, which I'll play for you, and then I'll play the enhanced audio separately in SpectraLayers. Please note this was presented in court, and I'm allowed to present the video, although there's no face blurring or other redaction, just because it's not required, but I also didn't have a chance to blur out the subject's face. Okay, here we go with the video. Let's go full screen.
Right, so an hour after. Stop it. Stop it. Avoiding conflict? I'm avoiding conflict. Just say that.
Stop it! You're kicking me and you already hit me in the face. Stop. Stop.
Let it go with the
Okay, so this is, at this point, the audio is muffled because the phone fell onto a bed, and you'll hear various sounds, but the key issue is what's being said and what's happening in this section, which is currently nearly silent. So I'm not going to make you listen to the whole thing, but I will do the enhanced in a second, and you'll see the effect that the use of SpectraLayers had on at least the intelligibility of the evidence at trial. Okay. Okay, I'll stop there. And let's take a detour to SpectraLayers. So, here in SpectraLayers, this is the original audio that I've extracted from the video file. And obviously the lower amplitude sections are what's the most important here. So after it's been enhanced with my clumsy efforts and a few of Robin's excellent tools, it starts to sound something like this. Okay, so I think that's enough of that. He says, "Don't ever touch me again." In that section where previously inaudible, couldn't do anything with that, and then the enhanced audio clearly played just like that in the trial. Everyone's hearing the same thing at the same time, and he says what he says, and there's more. According to the party's testimony, the male subject, which is my client, experienced this incident and then dragged the other party through the house into the front yard. So anyway, that's example number one of use of spectral layers in trial. I thought it was effective, and everyone seemed to appreciate the effort that went into that. Although, as I said, I'm scratching the surface of what could be done with these tools. So that's sample number one. So as I said, my client lost the case, but the evidence I thought was effective. Domestic violence case number two. This one was an audio-only evidence that I enhanced, unmixed, and transcribed with SpectraLayers 10. And this was a challenging one because it was in Russian. And so we used the Russian language transcription feature in SpectraLayers. The legality of the recordings was potentially an issue because they were, California is a two-party consent state. So if you have your phone in your pocket and you're in a private place talking to your spouse, you may or may not be able to use that evidence. But in any case, the case settled because of the audio evidence that we had, where we took her death threats against my client and threatened to present those in court. And the other party ended up stipulating to a restraining order against them, presumably because of the risk they faced in paying the attorney fees and the costs, and also losing the case anyway. So they saved the money and stipulated to the restraining order. Let me show you the example in SpectraLayers. Here's the original with no effects applied. Let's play a few samples of this.
Почему нельзя? Это базовая, блядь, коммуникация. Я тебя услышал. Почему я каждый раз должна за это бороться, за то, чтобы меня просто услышали? Потому что я пришла тебе спокойно попросить, что, пожалуйста, в очередной раз составляй тарифы.
Вот ты сама говорила мне, что ты видишь, что-то сделай, как надо, там все просто мешает.
Okay, so that's an ideal case for many of the AI-assisted tools in SpectraLayers. We've got two parties talking over each other. We've got background noise, at least some level. And I need a transcript of what they're saying so I can take it to a transcription service and have a rough transcript for them to use, and also know what my client's version of what was said, whether that's accurate, or knowing what he's telling me is accurate. So here's my effort at unmixing the voices and also transcribing them. If I zoom in here, let's try this section.
Я не могу, когда я пришла и прошу спокойно, и говорю, что пожалуйста. В ответ вместо того, чтобы хорошо я услышал, это все, что мне нужно. Ты начинаешь, да ты, блядь, заткнись и перестань спорить.
So let me zoom in a little bit so you can see the transcript. I converted some of this to English so I can see what was said. But the transcript down here, like Robin was showing earlier, if you click on the phrase, it should select, if I double click this, it should select the portion of the audio that corresponds to that transcript portion. That's also extremely helpful in court because it provides instant visual feedback about what portion of the transcript is where, and the court or the jury can decide what they heard, whether the transcript is accurate. I also like the fact you can edit the transcript, which I think I pasted in the Google Translate of the Russian, and that's why it's English. But the key is that you have an SRT compatible subtitle file that you can export. And so I can put this onto an animated spectrogram of the audio playing, and the user will see, the audience will see the English subtitles of what the people are saying in Russian as they see an animated spectrogram. I think that's a very effective trial presentation method, as opposed to just having someone listen to the audio and see what it sounds like. Okay, so a little tight on time, so I'm going to move on here. Okay, that's domestic violence case 2. my experience and the future directions for software, there's a need for one integrated tool that does all the things I've listed here. That analyzes, enhances, repairs, transcribes, and presents forensic audio evidence in civil trials. And there needs to be an audit log so that the opposing expert can see what was done and if they can reproduce the results and whether they can have the same opinion. SpectraLayers and Mathematica have been a great combination for me, certainly, for current use, and I also think near future effective trial presentation. Near future challenges that I see in my work, reproducibility of results. So obviously, there aren't that many attorneys out there who are technically proficient at the level of using these programs. Although there's many technically proficient attorneys out there who are excellent at patent litigation or other things, they may not be familiar with audio. So there's a doubly important need for an audit log or history of operations that are critical for other experts to see what was done and advise the other side's attorneys to let them know, hey, this is a realistic or accurate result or not. Mitigation that I've planned, or I don't think I did this in these two cases, but I would do a screen recording with a narrative video of what was done, what steps were taken on the files, so that everyone sees what happened and how the results were reached. I also have offered in cases the unaltered original audio and the enhanced audio in advance so that the other side can see what they look like in advance of the trial, and maybe that will help settlement. I've also, the intention is that the fact finder can compare the original and enhanced, but I found in several cases the judge in particular doesn't want to even hear the original, they just want to hear the enhanced. And if the other side agrees to that, that's fine. But it looks transparent or reasonable or honest to give them the original, the enhanced, and explanation. So I found that to be effective. Second near future challenge is certainly AI hallucinations. The black box of AI does not reveal how AI reaches its results. So what if people don't agree on the results? Well, the solution I found, at least in the recent jury trial, was the jury instruction by agreement with the other side that the AI results were not dispositive and the fact finder can and should reach their own results based on what they heard. So, and then in actual cases, it seems to be a sufficient mitigation for now, at least with this particular set of tools. With generative AI, I'm at a loss on that one. I don't really have a solution for how to mitigate that, but as Robin indicated, there's no generative AI in SpectraLayers.
Yep.
So that's helpful. A few minutes I want to spend on concluding thoughts. The democratization of technology. So the point isn't that I use these, what I did specifically in these cases with these tools. The point that I see is that, the point that I'm making is what could be done with these tools. Probably a lot more than I'm doing. But the main feature or outcome is that the barriers to entry on audio engineering and forensic audio and presenting them in civil trials are drastically lower with these tools than they were before. Now I don't have to hire an expert witness to at least do a first take on the evidence. I can do it myself and then decide whether I need an expert for the trial. And that's helpful for me and also helpful for the client to control their costs. So I found that low barriers to entry, although they've given us shows online like Tiger King and YouTube videos and all these other, what I would consider marginal level content, low barriers to entry are ultimately a good thing because they reveal an aspect of the truth that we may be denying. Garbage content or low quality content may be the truth. It's just that most people create average quality content and that's just the way it is. So why should we turn away from that? I think we should embrace the democratization of technology because the availability of average quality evidence, even from consumer phones, has sometimes enhanced the search for truth, has resolved cases, has settled litigation, has made it cheaper because the client would rather know in advance that they're going to lose because of this evidence than find out 2 years and $250,000 later. So it's efficient, is my point, with democratization of content. The greatest good for the greatest number of people is served by having a lower barrier to entry on these tools. It increases the accessibility of the tools and the methods and ultimately the science to normal people without the traditional gatekeeping function of experts. And I realize there's an inherent conflict in presenting a lower barrier to entry without gatekeeping at an expert conference, but I'm just telling the truth. So I think democratization of technology is overall a good thing for for this field. Future directions. SpectraLayers, I'm told, and I think I'm allowed to say, will include forensic-specific tools soon.
Right.
Robin is a one-man army on his program, and it's been incredible what he's been able to do with it. But that's going to be a very nice addition to SpectraLayers. Mathematica remains a research quality tool. I've been very happy with that, and they continue to improve it and add built-in functions for signal processing and audio. Example case that Robin and I talked about, the MH370 air disaster. So, as many probably know, there are various signals and signal recordings available from MH370, and many of those have not been released, and probably never will be released. There is nothing inherent in these programs, Mathematica and SpectraLayers, that requires you to use them in the range of human hearing. So I pose a question. What would happen if we had the raw quadrature signal data from MH370 and ran it through SpectraLayers and Mathematica? That's to be continued. As I say here, the FBI and NTSB have denied my FOIA request for the IQ signal data. However, they indicated that it may exist. So that's positive hope for the future for this case study. But I'm very excited about applying SpectraLayers and Mathematica to ranges outside of human hearing and seeing what happens with other signal data types. So I left about 9.5 minutes for questions for both myself and Robin. Thank you very much. Yes.
So the Russian example that you gave, I think you said that didn't actually make it to court.
Correct.
So if it had gone to court, would you have had to get the translation verified by a human?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a rule in California that a foreign language exhibit has to be translated by a certified interpreter.
Okay.
So we give a rough transcript to the interpreter and then just ask them to tweak it so that it's super accurate.
Okay.
That was our plan in that case.
Okay. And so you had some verification that what you were dealing with was roughly correct, or it was just relying on the transcription and Google translation?
I first asked my client to give his own transcript because I wanted to see what he would say.
Okay.
And then I did my own transcript in SpectraLayers and ran it through Google Translate to see roughly was it accurate what the client told me, and it was accurate.
Okay.
And then we went to the certified interpretation service, which is the most costly,
Yeah.
and then did that. So it was all accurate. I mean, the performance of the performance of the transcription in SpectraLayers is excellent, I think, but it still needs some final tweaks for particular meanings of particular words in Russian, for example.
Yeah, it sounded pretty good recording. Yes. Eventually,
All right, questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks for the talk. With respect to admissibility and trying to explain the tools, have you used the argument of trying to play the residual to say this is whether it's a filtering operation, a simple filtering operation, or an AI tool, saying this is what was removed? Does that help its admissibility? Is that an argument that works, or are there other arguments for getting AI admitted as evidence?
So far, I think I've only used that argument, the argument that Robin was talking about earlier with the summing of the different components. I've used that maybe once in court, but in other occasions, there's never been a controversy over those techniques. They've always seen the original, seen the enhanced, and said, okay, fine. Right? Maybe that's good luck, but it's worked out. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah. So maybe there's some kind of audio tampering that, for example, if a client gives you an audio and there is some kind of audio tampering that's being applied to it, and you use this kind of tool allows you to see if there's any audio tampering or stuff like that that's in the audio.
So usually I would start with I would ask the client for the raw data file from their phone, or I use the phone extractor, like iMazing, whatever the program is for iPhones, to get the raw data file. And then I look at the metadata and make sure it's all matches what the client told me. And then hopefully they haven't had to edit anything, but I will always get the original if possible. And then I'll do a SHA-256 hash on the original file so that myself and the other council and experts all have one authentic copy to share.
You
But
always,
so sorry?
the audio, you always match the audio with the source, like you try to match the audio with the source.
Yes, I always try to get the original, as far back to the original source as possible. And one of the presentations, I think yesterday, there was a comment about recompression on evidence.com and or something equivalent, and that can be a concern, but since I always try to get the original file off the client's device, it's less of a concern for me.
The client says that I don't have, it doesn't have the phone, etc. It just has the audio.
If they just have the audio, then I'll look at it visually in SpectraLayers to make sure it looks consistent with what they told me. But ultimately, the other party, if they have a deposition or something, I can ask them, I can play the audio for them and say, hey, do you have any information that was altered? And then if they say no, no problem. If they say yes, then I need to know what was altered or what they said, and they can't always do that. Anyone else? Oh, in the back?
Excuse me. This might be a question for Robin, but I also want your opinion on it. So is there any learning that your software is doing on other outside sounds, other noise, materials that you apply to the source that you're working on within SpectraLayers, or is it all learning done right there in real time with your software?
So, yeah.
So I'm not sure if the question was about are some of the training examples used in the final inference, or is it about something else? Could you rephrase?
Sure. So does your software use outside like other versions of noise and sound to then apply to the source that you're using in your software? Or does your software just learn on what's been added to the
Yeah, no, so all the AI models in SpectraLayers are pre-trained. There is no training happening when you open another file. It's a static AI model, so it's been trained on a variety of different kind of noise. And then when you open a specific audio file, it does not change the AI model, it just reuse what it's been trained on, the different examples, and try to apply its best to the current example.
Okay.
And Truls,
Oh, sorry. Can I just have a quick follow-up? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So, and then we're talking about it doesn't have a history function yet, your software, correct? Did I understand that right?
So you have an history while you're doing your session, your work session, but it's not saved with the project file, and for now you can't export it. But that's something I'm working on.
You said you can export it or not?
Right now, no, but it's coming.
But you can save screenshots of your, how do you describe it, little packages of everything that was taken?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You can, and then to the lawyer, you would find that that would be acceptable if somebody wanted to be able to break it down and do the process all over again?
I think I would prefer, for now, I would do a screen recording where I narrate what I'm doing in the program and just giving the screen recording of everything. But in the future, I certainly would love an audit log.
Thank you.
Truls.
Thank you both for a great presentation. I just have to raise a bit of concern. You strongly spoke about the good things with democratization of tools, making the tools available for everybody. I kind of support that idea. I don't like that the tools cost millions of dollars. But my problem is, I work in the police, and if I release those tools to all the policemen, they will go for extract dialogue as they first move. And they don't know what they're doing. Let me just use 1 minute. There were a rape outside in the street in Oslo, and the police went out and asked for pictures and recording from a time span. One guy stood come to the police and said, I have a snoring problem. So I have this app on my phone that records my snoring. So I do have a recording from the time you asked for. I got this snoring recording, and in the end of it, yeah, I could possibly hear a female screaming and a male saying some words. And I was very difficult to hear what he said, so I pressed the extract dialog. And suddenly, through the whole recording, there were this male kind of talking. It was actually that good that I urged to try to write some dialogue. And then I asked myself, why didn't I hear this on the original recording? Went back, no, the original talk. Did the processing with adaptive filters? No, there were no talk. So the AI model has created speech from the snoring sounds. You see my point.
Read your dreams.
You have to have some knowledge to use the sharp tools. You can't give that to everybody or policeman to present it code.
And maybe you may be 100% correct. It may be a bad thing that these tools are more accessible because they're susceptible to abuse or other misuse. I think ultimately it comes down to the finder of fact, and the jury, and appropriate jury instructions need to be adopted by the Judicial Council in California on forensic evidence or on the process of analyzing evidence with AI or so on. But ultimately, this may be a policy concern. I think unless we want the forensic directive that the Met has to work with, I'm not sure where that leaves us in the US with all the different state and federal legal systems all trying to match each other's results, which are inconsistent.
Yeah, very interesting presentation. I'm delighted that you guys are here. The question that comes up frequently is when the recording of the dialogue is really, really bad. So the examples we've had, pretty much by amplifying or separating, you can kind of make out what's being said. But many of the important recordings are not like that. They're very, very low level with lots of noise, and there's going to be a dispute about what the utterance means, and it will not be necessarily interpreted. So I'm curious, in the court situation, if the automatic transcription system has come up with some description, is that given more weight than what a person might judge listening to that? Or what is currently, do people assume that the technology is better than it might really be?
What I've seen is that people, including jurors, accept that this is the best effort that a computer can do. And so they're not accepting it fully for what they hear. And they're being instructed to only find what they hear.
The problem is, as soon as you present a transcript to somebody, they're going to hear that. So it's a very biased presentation, and I'm curious if the courts are even allowing that.
In a jury trial, I would play the audio first and then give them the transcript.
But
they don't see the transcript first.
But how confident are you in that transcript, I guess is my question.
I'd say usually in the AI transcript, I'm at about 90%, 85%. But then the professional interpreter takes the file, in the case of the Russian transcript, or a professional transcriptionist might do it for the English. So either way, we're getting most of the way there.
So the situation often is somebody has taken this recording that's really terrible, and they boosted the high frequencies with equalization. They've applied a gain compression to try to pull out things, and pretty much you've got a signal like this snoring thing, which is really not the original signal anymore. And so now you're trying to interpret that, and I'm just curious in court how they're going to deal with these kind of things, because it's really no longer the original signal. It's a highly processed thing. It's not a layer that you can add up again and get the original signal. It's been processed before it's interpreted.
You're absolutely right. There are situations where the signal will be too faint or whatever to be transcribed. If the jury finds that they can hear it and all 12 of them agree on what it says, that's the fact. So that's what we have to accept, at least until they change the law.
Luca, you had your hand up.
Yeah, but the question was related to Robin. Do you have like a full list of the training data behind the algorithms?
I can't hear you.
He said Robin.
I think that
He said Robin.
Yeah, I think for most of the models, this list can be it can be retrieved.
Because otherwise, as soon as the artificial intelligence Act in Europe kicks in, those won't be usable in court.
Well, most of the AI models were trained on publicly known data set that's not very often in the models training.
So I've done a lot of criminal trials in California court with contested transcripts. So, but to speak to like the way that it goes is that the other side is going to produce a transcript that they have some degree of confidence of, and then you also can produce a transcript. And I do not think that media transcripts should be allowed because of the Lobel, but I also don't agree that it's appropriate for like a criminal defendant to just unilaterally decide not to produce one. And so when we produce one, it's compelling, and sometimes the first one that you hear is the one that you go with. Regardless, like you said, the actual evidence is the native original, and the rest of it is interpretive. And to speak to the argument that AI is involved and you're not making any decisions, just like you were talking about with SpectraLayers, I've done it with across, like, independent of the tool. The idea is that we can see the spectrogram and discern like what is part of a voice and what isn't. And even if you can't, the value of your tool is not in the AI processing, because the shapes that they make are shapes that you can pretty easily use the tools to select. And you can check yourself against it by making recursions to that A-B selection, so that each time you can check it against the original to determine like how much, in this case, how much of the residual energy from the bass kick in Enter Sandman is still present in the crowd voice. And to speak to your question about the feathering, all the feathering does is, there is no like opacity per se, the way Photoshop's feathering would work. It just tightens the border on the selection, which you can also just do by zooming in and using the brush and the selection tool. So there is no half on one side and half on the other. And when you send something, it sends it to whatever like cascading array of layers is important to you. So I find myself having to create a new project every time I want to make an exhibit, an observation, or do any process to the. I wish I didn't have to make a new project. The tree would fix that.
Right. Yeah.
But when you were like trying to get that sibilance or the hi-hat, whatever the shape you were trying to get, everyone in this room could see that shape was separate and what the selection would be, and could probably draw a layer around it. And you do not need AI tools. And if you want to first do your own separations, it's not very difficult because you can see and hear intuitively. Then you can ask AI, like, where do we agree, where do we differ? But the separation becomes apparent the more you take a separated stem and further select portions and select where to send them, discerning when you're listening to it against the original.
Yeah, that's the way I see AI in SpectraLayers as an accelerator, but you don't have to end at the result of the AI. The whole idea is to get to the result that you really want using all the tools at your disposal in the software.
The non-restrictive layers is the value.
All right, we have 2 minutes. So we have 2 people, quick question, and we're okay. It's lunch, so we have a hard go.
Is section 998 applicable to all California state courts?
All California state courts, and it's only civil, not
It's civil.
civil only, all California civil courts.
Thank you.
So like family law, not family law, general civil is the primary use of it, and not other types.
Best way to do this is just to give you this example and ask if you've tried, if you have a way of tackling this with your system. Say you've got a mono recording and you've got a conversation that you want to hear, that you're trying to hear, and there's a TV on, and the television is almost as loud as the conversation, but of course this is it's an episode of a TV show actually.
Yeah.
So you've got voices, you've got music, you've got all kinds of other sounds coming off the TV, and very confusing. But you know what the episode is, and you can find it. You found the original episode.
I see where you're.
Can you teach this? That this is the episode, and this is what I want to
yeah, there are different
subtract
approaches.
from the
Yeah,
audio?
there are different approaches in SpectraLayers where you can indeed deal with this kind of case where you have a non-music or a non-TV show in the background, and then you download this original episode or sound, and you create a secondary layer with this original. You synchronize them in time with
Then reverse the phase, you mean like that?
Let's go with the simple case. I'm not going to too much travels, but so the idea is that we synchronize the original song of TV show with the recording that we have, and then we have different options in SpectraLayers. We have a module which is called spectral casting. It takes the amplitude, the spectral amplitudes from one layer and remove them from the other layer. Or you have an AI module, which I didn't show there, which called D-Bleed, which was originally designed to remove bleeding when you record your band. Like there is a mic for the drum set, a mic for the guitar, the etc. And these AI modules analyze all the different layers that you have, and it removes what's too common between two layers. So if you have your TV show playing and you're recording, then it will try to match the common frequencies and remove them from each other. So yeah, that's two different approaches to the same problem.
Great, thank you everybody.